very, very happy to be in Bangkok. So it's very endearing to see such a big crowd. It's Labor Day, it's a public holiday, so yeah, it's pretty amazing. I don't think people in Singapore are actually that hardworking as compared to you guys. So yeah, I think today I want to share a little bit more about what we are building out at dYdX. And a little bit more about DAO governance. So I know that a lot of you guys here are early stage builders, so maybe this is something that will only be applicable to you when your project is a little bit more mature, when you're thinking of launching a token, when you're thinking about governance. But it's never too late to kind of get some good insights about what some DAOs are doing, what are some of the opportunities and challenges of DeFi governance today. So yeah. Personally, I have a product management background, and right now I'm working on governance as well as a little bit of growth on the Southeast Asia region for dYdX. So before I jump in, okay, wait, let me just test to make sure this works. Do you know how this works? Sorry. I already connected the USB here. Okay, while he's helping me to set up, show of hands, who has actually traded on dYdX before? Oh shit, that's not a lot. Who has traded on a DEX before? So I'm guessing a lot of these hands are actually spot DEXs, right? Like AMMs, like Uniswap, whenever like a new token launches and then you guys go for it. So what is the split between your trading on a centralized exchange versus the decentralized exchange? Anyone care to give me your answer?
100% on DEXs.
Love it, DeFi maximalist. Anyone else? Behind you? By the way, I have merch to give out, so please answer my questions. Yeah.
Okay, half and a half. Yeah.
Why is there a half on centralized exchanges?
It's more about the fee or user experience, and also some different token, some different liquidity, a lot of things, I think.
Got it. So what you're saying is there is a variety of reasons. One is the entire user experience is just better on centralized exchanges.
Yes.
There's better liquidity, and then there are more token listings as well, right?
Yes.
So as a retail investor, those points all make sense. And this is where DeFi as a whole needs to improve, right? The product experience is horrible, right? I believe a lot of you can kind of attest to that. Right now, to even start on DeFi, you need to first create a MetaMask account or whatever account you want. Store your seed phrase and then, get some funds in. And even getting the funds in is difficult, right? Because you need to first deposit fiat into a centralized exchange. Or if you want, you can find some stablecoin provider and hopefully you can do a mint or whatsoever, bridge it over to your self-custodial wallet. And then from there, then you can start interacting with the protocol that you want to trade on. But even from there, you'd have to first connect your wallet to the app. You'd have to sign some messages to kind of approve the app to kind of interact with your wallet. And then you can start doing your DeFi degen stuff. So look at all these different steps, right? That's why DeFi right now is just not getting the traction it needs. One, we need to get a killer app. And the second, we need to hone in on the product experience. And that's something that I really, really advocate for. I think Impossible Finance, Kelvin kind of alluded to this earlier, deciding what chain to build on is important, but I think what's even more important is understanding where your product, what kind of problem is your product solving? Is this gonna apply to a mass audience? And what exactly is the user experience there? Can your mom use it? Can your grandma use it, right? If you can address that, that is the bigger statement that you wanna gun for, instead of understanding, oh, should I build on Ethereum? Should I build on Arbitrum? Should I use Cosmos to build on? Right, so that's something that I think it's a little bit more applicable for the audience today to kind of think about from a product standpoint. So just to share a little bit more about dYdX, right? So we are a leading decentralized exchange for perpetuals trading on layer 2. So we are currently on an iteration called dYdX version 3. So we're built on top of Starkware, which is a layer 2 zero knowledge rollup to Ethereum. Right, and our mission is essentially to build the world's leading crypto trading platform, right? So we're not just looking to compete with the likes of other DEXs like Uniswap, GMX, or whatsoever. We're actually gunning for the likes of Binance, the likes of Bybit and OKX, really doing a lot of studies into how they're better right now, what kind of on-ramps, what kind of product features they have that DeFi doesn't, and kind of trying to build on solutions to kind of bridge that gap so that more people can directly go on to DeFi straight. We have roughly about $1 billion worth of daily trading volume, which is, I think, still not too bad given the market conditions that we have. And we have a pretty sick DeFi mobile app. So you can kind of see here, like this is our web app right here. The interface is very similar to what you'd see on like a Binance or OKX or a lot of other centralized exchanges, right? So we are different from Uniswap in the sense that we operate on an order book model as compared to an automated market maker model, which I think a lot of other retail people are more used to. So the reason for that is because we want to really hone in on the trading experience. We want to make sure that trades can be put in, can be cancelled with immediate effect, that people don't really get exposed to impermanent losses. So that is kind of why we decided to adopt an order book model. And I think we have a pretty slick, again, mobile app as well that I encourage everyone to kind of try out. So why would you want to trade on dYdX? One, it's because you can actually do very degen stuff, right? Like you can go 20x leverage or whatsoever. Same, you can do that on Binance as well, but why not just go DeFi all the way, right? We currently have 36 markets. Not a lot, but honestly, if you think about it, a lot of the volume for derivatives are still on Bitcoin and ETH markets, and we have a lot of liquidity there. So if you're trading those pairs, why not come to dYdX, right? You don't have to pay gas. It's instant trading. We support quite a few advanced order types. You can do cross margin, and for certain markets, you can go up to 20x leverage. So quick history on dYdX, and that hobo right there is actually our founder, Antonio. So the first version, that ugly ass symbol, was actually built on top of Ethereum layer 1 itself, right? So this was built in the midst of DeFi DeFi summer, sorry, where gas fees were like $30, $40 for a single trade. So product experience was horrible, right? Even though perpetuals trading was hot at that time. And then we moved on to the current iteration today, where we are on a layer 2 on Starkware, which is a zero knowledge proof rollup onto Ethereum. And what we're building out right now is the V4 dYdX chain. So it's going to be a standalone Cosmos SDK-based chain. And again, this migration is not throwing shade to Ethereum whatsoever. So I'm sorry, but honestly, a lot of the narrative that we've gotten is that, oh, why are you moving? We all know that Ethereum is the best settlement layer out there, right? And again, it hones back to why we actually decided to move is because we prioritize the product experience. We really want to make sure that traders get the best possible experience trading on dYdX as compared to other centralized exchanges. It's not saying that Ethereum is worse off than Cosmos, right? By no means, no, right? Obviously, Ethereum has better decentralization, better security, but from a Cosmos standpoint, it allows us to kind of build everything from scratch. We can customize what the validators do. We can customize block size. We can customize what the TPS is. So we find that all of these aspects were actually more suited for dYdX users, and that's why we took the brave step to kind of migrate over despite all the negative feedback that we got. So our mission is to essentially democratize access to financial opportunity. And again, we always look towards completely decentralizing the entire stack, right? So Antonio actually did say that the decentralization of a system is actually equal to the decentralization of its least decentralized component. That's a lot of decentralization in there. But if you inspect a DeFi protocol's tech stack, right? If you look at their front end, if you look at their indexer, if you look at their validators, if you look at every single aspect, and if you can point to a single aspect where there might be some layers of dependency or reliance, that is the area that you need to solve for if you truly want to be decentralized. And that's kind of why we, again, agreed to kind of move to Cosmos, is because it gives us the best possible way to kind of decentralize every single aspect of the protocol. We pride ourselves in thinking 10 times bigger. We want to completely decentralize the order book and matching engine right now, which is currently centralized. And come dYdX v4 launch, all the code will actually be open source. So we would, really encourage all builders to kind of look at the code, build your own dApps or build on top of dYdX, right? So again, why Cosmos? Because we found out that the Cosmos SDK actually allowed us to customize how the blockchain works and the jobs that validators kind of perform, right? Allows us higher scalability, higher throughput, and it gives us decentralization across all vectors. Yeah, so hopefully this is not going to bore you, but how it kind of works is every validator will actually run their own off-chain in-memory order book, right? So this is not going to be on-chain. And then whenever an order comes in, right, it will hit a random validator. So we're using the Tendermint's round-robin model, right? So every validator will get assigned a new order, and it's going on a round-robin format. So it will actually match within their order book first, and then if that validator is actually chosen to be the block proposer, then the completed trades on that validator node will actually be proposed on chain. So not all trades will immediately get posted on chain. It's only when the validator node is selected to be the block proposer, then all of the matches will be posted on chain. Right, so this actually allows us to do a lot of the order matching in a super high frequency and a super high pace. And the resulting trades are then essentially committed on-chain when the validator that is selected as the block proposer. Right, so what this allows is for zero gas fees, for extremely low latency and high throughput, similar to what you guys have on a centralized exchange, and it allows us to achieve a fully decentralized order book which offers deep liquidity. So we actually looked at many other L1s when we were trying to make this jump to significantly improve the product experience, right? We were looking at the likes of Solana, of Avalanche, of Optimism, of Arbitrum, many different blockchains, many different layer ones, and we realized that no one chain out there today can kind of support what we want, so we just decided to build the whole damn thing ourselves. So yeah, this is a quick overview of the progress. So we just completed milestone 3 where we concluded our private testnet. Milestones 1, 2, and 3 were really focused on making sure the core product worked. So making sure that validators knew how to actually run the software to validate blocks, to actually get orders in, to get order cancellations in. And then milestones 4 and 5 is really looking at how would governance actually work? How would IBC actually potentially be come into play here? How would token emissions work, right? So that is where a lot of the governance stuff comes into play, right? So outside of the core protocol itself, where we truly want to decentralize is across these 3 areas, right? So validators, front-end operators, and indexers. So again, our aim is to make sure that we decentralize every single aspect of the protocol just so that we don't have any single points of failure, right? And I think validators is something that everyone is more or less familiar with, right? They're essentially just nodes that ensure that the protocol is run securely, right? So they validate transactions, they propose blocks, and for dYdX's case, they actually manage the order book, right? So for private testnet, we have roughly 15 to 20 hand-selected validators, and then public testnet, which is slated to launch in July, we are looking at roughly 50 active validators, and then come mainnet, we are looking at 150 active validator set. So validation, running a validator node is going to be completely permissionless, but it's only the top 150 come mainnet that will actually be able to, validate transactions, propose blocks, and maintain the entire chain itself. So we're actively looking at service providers to potentially run the front end and indexer for the dYdX chain. So if you guys are interested, feel free to hit me up and let me know what you guys are building. Right, so on the governance side, I think we have a token right now. Show of hands, who actually qualified for the dYdX airdrop? Shit, okay, cool. So if you have dYdX tokens today, you can actually direct how the protocol runs. You can have a say in it, right? You can vote on proposals. So we have both an off-chain proposal. We have both an off-chain process as well as an on-chain process. Right, so off-chain is on snapshot as per a lot of other DeFi protocols, and then off-chain usually is used for sentiment signaling. So we want to make sure that we don't immediately move a proposal on-chain just because you have to pay gas, right? So we use off-chain, we use snapshot as an off-chain way to get a signal on whether people actually want a certain proposal to be passed. And then only when there's strong signaling, then we would encourage the community members to go on-chain and start proposals to get another round of voting in. So this round is actually where all the gas fees come into play. All right, so from a governance process, it's relatively simple. Again, this is something that you guys might want to think of when your product is a little bit more mature, when you've gotten some traction and when you have launched a token. When you think about governance, it's always important to first have a forum for discussions to happen, for people to banter, to discuss pros and cons and iterate off of the proposal, right? And then you might want to move it on to an off-chain vote. So there are many, many different providers like Snapshot that actually support off-chain voting. This is gasless, right? So it's off-chain, so people can vote without needing to pay any gas fees. And it's a good way to kind of understand what the sentiment is. And if there's a strong sentiment, then you can kind of push it on-chain. So I think beyond just the governance process, what we're actively thinking about is how can we decentralize as an ecosystem, how we can decentralize as a DAO, right? So our DAO today only has 2 sub-DAOs, right? So you can kind of see that we have 2 purple ones, the grants sub-DAO as well as the operations sub-DAO. So grants is essentially very standard, right? It's just this body which funds all the builders that want to contribute to the dYdX ecosystem. Not something new in DeFi at all. And for the operations sub-DAO is actually a body which is going to be looking after all the infrastructure requirements to make sure that the DAO can expand, right? So thinking about how sub-DAOs can communicate, thinking about how payments will work, thinking about HR, thinking about payroll, right? Thinking about did I say forums? No, forums, yeah. So anything operational, we want to make sure that that infrastructure is set before we onboard more sub-DAOs. And we actually released a dYdX DAO playbook, which kind of goes through like all the different considerations that you need to put into play when you're thinking of starting your own sub-DAO, right? So basically thinking about when should a sub-DAO be created, what kind of entity do you want to establish? Because there's a lot of like regulatory uncertainty around sub-DAOs or working groups or whatsoever, right? So do you want to use a Cayman's Foundation? Do you want to use like a Guernsey Purpose Trust? Do you want to use a United States non-profit entity, right? So we have many, many descriptions on what should be considered when you want to start a sub-DAO. So would highly recommend that you guys check this out if you are at the stage where you want to launch your own sub-DAO or when you are thinking of potentially decentralizing your whole ecosystem. So we have a pretty vibrant ecosystem right now of just basic DAO contributors, delegates, market makers, and then media partners, infrastructure, research, and prospective Cosmos partners, right? So I think our end game is we believe that DeFi is going to trump everything. In 2020 and 2021, we saw collapses of a lot of centralized entities, right? Like BlockFi collapsed, and then FTX rugged us. Celsius collapsed as well, right? So we actually saw quite a good flow of volume over to DEXs, but we don't know if that is actually something that's sustainable, right? Because it might just be a one-off thing. One thing about DeFi is we can't do all the shenanigans that CeFi is able to do, right? I think that's something that I don't really need to share with a lot of you guys since most of you guys are like crypto people here. But I believe that DeFi is inevitable. It represents a fundamental improvement to CeFi, to banks, to basically centralized financial institutions. And ultimately, we want to make sure that we push the frontier. We want to make sure that the user experience is better for DeFi. We want to make sure that the product experience is better. We want to make sure that people find it easy to use, and people don't think about using DeFi as just qualifying for an airdrop whatsoever. It has to significantly improve their lives and make their lives a bit easier. So a little bit on DAO governance, right? So I don't know how you guys think about DAO governance, but it should be pretty simple. DAO governance is essentially how decision-making happens in a decentralized ecosystem, right? So it can include anything from simple upgrades to literally changing the whole consensus model of a protocol to allocating block rewards as well, right? So when we think about governance, there is voting involved, right? So I think there is a lot of experimentation throughout crypto, right? But when it comes to voting, it's very standard right now. We all see this one token, one vote model, and this model is obviously very, very flawed because a whale can just come in and sway the whole vote. right? We saw this with like Uniswap when they were deploying on, I believe, Binance, if I'm not wrong. I can't remember offhand. But yeah, we had A16Z come in versus Jump Capital to decide on what bridge to use, and that's where like a lot of the one token, one vote model benefits are actually being questioned. So I think, you know, it fits a traditional use case of public corporations quite well, right? We see this very commonly in shareholder votings when it comes to like public companies, but you know, crypto is special, right? We value decentralization, we value democracy, and we value community. So again, what is a typical process like? You discuss on the governance forums, you go to an on-chain vote, and then you off-chain vote, and then if it works, you bring it on-chain, right? So when you think about some first principles questions, should everyone actually be voting on proposals, right? Who are the stakeholders that we want to target? Who should actually be voting? Because voter apathy is something that is very real when it comes to governance. Not everyone is capable to make the best possible decision for the protocol, right? Most token holders are actually just airdrop farmers. So how do we actually make sure that we give the right people the decision-making powers, right? What can governance change and what should be immutable? The whole premise of DeFi is to make sure that there is trustlessness and there's transparency, right? So if governance can kind of change everything, then what's the point, right? So I think it's super important to think about, you know, what core aspects of the protocol should remain unchanged no matter what. So this, a good example I can think of is like the collateralized debt positions for MakerDAO. I think that's something that is the core of MakerDAO and should never be changed, but everything else is up for debate. What decision should go off-chain versus what can go on-chain, right? Because again, just down to transparency, right? If it's on-chain, everyone can kind of query it, everyone can kind of contest it and audit it, right? But a lot of decisions in DAOs are actually made off-chain for efficiency purposes, for, basically efficiency purposes, right? If you push everything on-chain, every single decision is gonna take 3 months to kind of implement, right? So thinking about what decisions need to go off-chain versus on-chain is also an important aspect of governance. And then how do you actually balance efficiency versus equitable decision-making, right? So a lot of the most active community members, a lot of the most active participants in the protocol might not always be the people that hold the most amount of tokens, right? So I believe all of you guys know a lot of DeFi protocols, they have huge VCs backing them, right? And these VCs actually hold like maybe roughly 30% of the total token supply. And honestly, I don't know how involved they are with the protocol's day-to-day operations, so much so that they can actually come in to make an informed decision. It's actually the people on Discord. It's actually the people who are actually using the protocol that should be the forefronts, the people who actually push proposals to actually make decisions. But, you know, it goes back to the question of democracy, right? So how do we actually ensure that there is equitable decision-making? That's a question that I ask myself every day. So there are many different governance models that we've seen. So start from the left, your left, yeah, left, right? So with centralized decision making, I think that's something that we see a lot in the early days of the protocol. So I think that is something that you guys should be doing from the very get-go, understanding what product decisions need to be made, finding out what the product market fit is. A lot of these decisions need to be made centrally, and only when you've captured a certain audience, when you've captured product market fit, then you can think about decentralizing the protocol for regulatory reasons or for maybe token issuance purposes, right? And then we've seen the most common model being used, the one token, one vote model. And then some more innovative models that I've seen when it comes to governance involve delegates, right? So I'll go into all these different aspects individually. So let's start with delegates. I think delegates are just people that you kind of push or that you kind of delegate your voting and proposing powers to. These are people that you trust that can make the best decisions for you, right? So a lot of DeFi protocols actually have a delegation model where people actually put up their profiles saying, hey, I am doing all these different trades on dYdX. I know exactly what's working and what's not. So you should actually entrust your voting power and proposing power to me, right? I can make the best decisions on your behalf, right? So that is the concept of delegation, and we've seen the likes of Optimism, the likes of Uniswap, and a lot of many other protocols actually deploy delegation as part of their governance. right? We also have validators that actually participate in governance, right? So I think this is more prominent in the Cosmos ecosystem, where it's validators who are actually the ones proposing blocks that are running, that are making decisions for the protocol. But there are many questions here, right? So a lot of these validators, how many of them actually understand the protocol in and out to make the best decisions possible, right? So this is something that we're actively thinking through as dYdX kind of migrates from Ethereum over to Starkware. How do we make sure that decision-making power isn't being diluted and it's being passed on to these folks that might not have the best context when it comes to decision-making for the protocol itself? We also have council models, right, where token holders actually elect community members to make decisions on their behalf, right? So they actually, it's quite political, right? So everyone would have to actually put up their profile, and then there's going to be like a voting period where people say, okay, I want A, B, and C to run on all these councils, and these council members can actually make decisions on our behalf autonomously, and there are many, many different periods as well, right? So maybe I say I vote these people in to be on the council for 3 to 6 months, and then after that, then a new round of voting happens. So it's very similar to what you guys have with politics today, and we see this being pretty prominent in synthetics as well as in element finance. And then we also have working groups and sub-DAOs, right? So I think ENS is pioneering this model where they actually use pods from Orca protocol, it's now actually called Metropolis. So all of these protocols, all of these pods are actually separate working groups with their own niches, and they can make decisions based on all of their niches for the entirety of the protocol. So everything is very, very niche, right? And they can, again, only make decisions on a specific set of areas. And then lastly, we have identity-based voting. So this is a very novel approach to governance, right? So Optimism is kind of pioneering this, where there is one side of the house which is called the token house, where it's just every token holder can kind of vote on proposals. It's one token, one vote. But then on the other hand, we have what we call the citizens house, right? It's people who actually are conferred these soul-bound NFTs based on their contributions to the protocol, based on their credentials, and they are the ones that can make decisions on a certain number of parameters. So for Optimism's case, it's the retroactive public goods funding, which they're essentially known for, that all these citizens who are conferred the soul-bound NFTs can make decisions for. Right, so I think this is essentially my last slide when it comes to thinking about DAO governance, right? We need to think about how we can balance efficiency, equitable decision-making, and transparency. So far, unfortunately, I don't think any DAO has kind of perfected this. And that's where the opportunity is, right? If you can come up with a way to make sure that all community members or participants in a protocol can actually make valuable contributions and not be slighted just because they have a lower token holding, then I think you have built something new that the broader ecosystem can kind of look at and reference. So yeah, that concludes it for governance. Hopefully you guys are not too bored by that. Feel free to follow me on Twitter or whatsoever, and yeah, just being an active DeFi protocol, I actually purchased the Pulley Lawyer. I don't know how many of you guys actually know Pull Together, but that's the proudest NFT that I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Clifton. Any questions regarding DAO, regarding dYdX, regarding the ecosystem? Anyone building DAO?
I think
No?
too early, yeah.
Too?
Too early, yeah. You have a DAO? Why not?
We need more time to develop the specific part of the voting, and this kind of decision, what your thought that you expose, how to do it, and what is fair and what is not. We haven't reached that level yet. So for this time, we will have to pass.
Understand, yeah.
But for the project, that's definitively a necessity.
Product market fit is the most important thing. Governance is later, yeah. Yeah, you can shoot me any questions with regards to like DeFi or governance or whatsoever, yeah.
Could you talk more about the validators, what it takes to become one, and And the requirements for it?
So there are some hardware requirements that isn't published yet, but it's going to be permissionless, and all the code is actually going to be open source nearer to public mainnet, probably like July period where we have public testnet. All the code will be out, and you can try to run a validator node. I don't exactly know what the token holdings are, but essentially you need to be in the top 150 active validator set come mainnet in order to actually, get rewards, block rewards, and propose blocks on the dYdX chain.
So what kind of contributors are you looking at for validators for allocations? Or do you do allocations?
What do you mean allocations?
That means like foundation allocated
Funds.
funds for like
Not doing it for free.
delegation to the
Yeah.
nodes.
Okay, so what I'll say right now is that all the fees, all the trading fees for dYdX is going towards this entity called dYdX Trading. It's the company that actually built the exchange from scratch. But come dYdX v4, when we launch the Cosmos chain, that entity will no longer be getting any fees at all. So it's up to the community to decide how the fees should be distributed.
Right. I think maybe the question wasn't very clear. It's like I guess like a lot of Cosmos chain, they have like different contributors for coming from the validators. So they do a active delegation to the validators so that they keep them in the active set, right? So is that a practice that dYdX would probably adopt?
Very, very, very likely, yeah.
Yeah. So what kind of contributions are you most likely looking at so that someone can become a active validator as well? Yeah.
When it comes to active validators, again, it's permissionless. It's gonna be dependent on, I imagine, your state, right?
Yes.
But when it comes to like maybe your own validator profile, whether you actually actively contribute to public goods funding within the Cosmos ecosystem,
Right.
whether you actively contribute in the forums, we are gonna expose all of those data points on top of like your uptime, your availability, right? All of these many different factors we will actually flash out for token holders to kind of look at and decide whether they want to delegate to you. So in a way, if you actually do a lot of other ancillary things outside of being outside of maintaining your uptime, then hopefully more token holders will stick to you guys, and that will actually boost your chances to move up the active validator set.
Okay, so the foundation don't actively try and uplift people into the active set.
We will make sure that we flash out ways for you guys to contribute, but we won't actively vouch for any. We won't actively vouch for any validator to be like the validator you should vote
Or
to.
make a stake on the validators.
That's to be determined
Okay.
because of regulatory concerns. Yeah.
Oh, okay, sure. Your question.
Very interesting. No, it's
I have one question. So I think most of the projects, like we see token holders and tokens and the protocol itself in the same chain. dYdX going through like Ethereum, Starkware, Starknet, I think, and then Cosmos. Like, can you share a bit like how that transition affects like the tokens and also the DAOs and also like delegation? Since I think like there will be like tokens on Ethereum still, and then Cosmos.
Yeah, that's a very good question, right? So if we go all the way back to one of my earlier sites, the history of dYdX, I think there wasn't much issues when we were transitioning from layer 1 to layer 2. One second, let me just go back here. Right, so from layer 1 to layer 2, not much changes on the token front because dYdX as a token is an ERC20, right? So governance can still function on Ethereum. But when we move over to the Cosmos chain, that's where a lot of questions appear, right? What kind of mechanism do we use to actually make sure that there is an active L1 token for the dYdX chain? Do we want to do an airdrop? Do we want to do a mint and burn, a one-way bridge? If yes, then what kind of bridge do we want to use? And all of these considerations, which ones do we actually want to make sure that the community makes a decision on? Which one should be decided on by the core team because they have the most context, right? So right now, unfortunately, a lot of these questions are unanswered. And just to expand on that, right? Beyond just migrating tokens, we need to think about how do we actually migrate our treasuries over? How do we actually migrate our smart contracts over? And over what period of time? How do we actually do it? Because when migration happens, it's not going to happen instantly for everyone, right? It's going to be phased. And then when it's at a certain point, does it actually introduce a security risk for the current iteration of the protocol? So all of these points are actively being debated on, researched on. We look at other chains that have done migrations in the past as well, like Crypto.com, like Binance from the BNB token on ERC20 to their BEP20, I believe. Yep. For MakerDAO from Psy to DAI. So unfortunately, not the answers aren't like out there yet. We're still like weighing the pros and cons of each approach, and we're getting a lot of feedback from the community on this as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Long way of saying I don't know. If you guys don't have any other questions, I'll be here until Wednesday. So yeah, feel free to hit me up. Can talk a little bit more about product, DeFi as a whole, and governance if you guys have any questions that I can help with.
All right, and thank you so much, Clifton.
Thank you.
And next up,